With Ghana at a pivotal crossroads under its forthcoming leadership, can bold reforms and ambitious plans set the stage for perhaps Africa's next economic success story? Good morning. It's another power-packed episode of Business Week. This week, Moody's sounds the alarm on France with a negative rating outlook, while Rwanda goes full throttle with a bid to host Formula One. Over in Asia, India names a new central bank chief to tackle inflation and slowing growth, and Tokyo takes a radical turn, planning for a 4-day work week to combat its declining birth rate. Back here in Africa, Zimbabwe braces for a worsening food insecurity crisis amidst an El Nino-induced drought. And in today's deep dive, we're turning the spotlight on Ghana's economic journey as President-elect John Mahama embarks on a bold 26-point agenda to reset the nation. I'm Rolake Akigwe-Faleni, and as always, I'm here to help you catch up on the week. Stay tuned. As always, you can see the festive season, Christmas tree, mini Christmas tree behind me. We'll start with a look at global energy commodities. Brent was up at the end of trading on the week, as was WTI crude. And this is despite OPEC forecasting a slowdown in growth in oil demand for 2024. Natural gas was down by 3.53%. RBOB gasoline was up by 0.58%. Let's take a look at global markets, equities around the world. Of course, starting here with Nigeria, the all share index closed the week up on a positive note, closing at 99,378.06 points. 0.63% up, not bad. Over 8,000 deals. Volume of shares, not too bad, but still fairly low, 554.3. Total value of 10.6 billion naira. And market cap, over 60. Let's see if it stays there during the holiday season. 60.24 trillion naira. Let's take a look at African markets. Across the continent, it was green all through. Thankfully, both Johannesburg, Accra, Nairobi and Casablanca all ended the week on a positive note. Not much else to say there. Everything seems to be holding up. Let's look at European markets. Quite the opposite across Europe. Starting with Euro Stock 600, which was down by 0.56. FTSE was also down. London was down by 0.31%. DAX in Germany was down by 0.13%. And no surprises here. CAC 40 in Paris. I'll be talking about France in a bit. We saw a major downgrade by a global ratings agency on the economic outlook in France. So the CAC 40 index in Paris was down by 0.28%. Why? Let's talk about that as I take a look at my top picks. Of course, France was my first story. Moody's has downgraded France to AA3 status. That's 3 notches below the maximum rating for Europe's second largest economy. And of course, amidst the political turmoil, there's a new prime minister appointed by President Emmanuel Macron. His name is François Bayrou. And the former prime minister, Michel Barnier, was ousted after the far-right group, the National Rally led by Marine Le Pen, and leftist parties came together in a vote of no confidence against the former prime minister's plans to reduce the budget deficit. Now, you're probably thinking, reducing a budget deficit is a good thing, right? But in order to do that, you have to introduce austerity measures. And both the far left and the far right were not having it. Now, this is France President Emmanuel Macron's 4th prime minister this year. Just think about that, the 4th prime minister. So a bit of political turmoil in France there, and Moody's thinks that political turmoil has also affected the government's ability to really rein in on the budget deficit, which is seen expanding to about 5.2% of GDP this year. Now, if you're a member state of the EU, there are rules. There's a harmonization of monetary policy. You have to keep your budget deficit within 3% of GDP. France has already breached that limit and is seeing a budget deficit of 5.2. So there are really concerns around the French economy and what will happen in 2025. Many of the ratings agencies believe that France will struggle to rein in that budget deficit, primarily due to political pressure. And of course, we're seeing some of that manifest in recent times. We'll be keeping an eye on that because France is a very important economic power in Europe. Rwanda's President Paul Kagame is bidding for Rwanda to host Formula One. Now, you're probably thinking, Rolake, what does this have to do with business? But Rwanda's tourism industry is a big deal. It contributes about 10% to GDP. Now, Kagame and his government are planning to build a state-of-the-art racing circuit just outside Kigali, the country's capital. And they feel this will really help the country achieve some of its key goals around tourism. It's expected to add almost $150 million in revenues to the tourism pot, tourism receipts for the country. The country could see 100,000 visitors, new visitors annually as a result of hosting Formula One. A real boost to the GDP. And Rwanda is, of course, positioning itself as not just an African events hub, but a global events hub. And if it succeeds, it will join the likes of Monaco, Abu Dhabi, Dubai, and who else? Singapore as venues, prestigious venues that have hosted the world-famous Formula One. So we'll be keeping an eye on whether Kagame is able to pull this one. It would not just be a great thing for Rwanda, but obviously a great thing for Africa. And speaking of Africa, not since 1993, when South Africa hosted Formula One, has an African country ever hosted Formula One. India has appointed Sanjay Malhotra, as its new central bank chief after Shinkatra Das, the former central bank chief, was asked to go. Now, concerns around rising inflation and slowing GDP in India. Of course, markets didn't react too well because they see Malhotra as a bit of a dovish policymaker when it comes to monetary policy. So they think he will ease rates. And that's not a great thing because capital flight, but he probably will look at a policy of rates easing in order to try and get growth up, despite concerns around inflation. So markets have not received the news so well, and there are concerns around the Reserve Bank of India's independence, given the close relationship between Malhotra and the government of Moody. But again, India changes its leadership at the helm of monetary policy in the country. Will that lead to some sort of economic revival for the country? Well, time will tell. OPEC has made its deepest cut to its production forecast for 2024. It's cut that forecast by a whopping 500,000 barrels a day, bringing its outlook for global demand in 2024 to 102.4 million barrels. Now, OPEC has really been struggling amidst rising supplies in the North American market, concerns around what the coming Trump administration will do in terms of the energy markets and its energy policies. But OPEC says, well, this is our deepest cut in 5 years. We need to do this perhaps to support prices because, frankly, most analysts and observers of the market are predicting a downward trend in prices in 2025. And finally, Tokyo in Japan. The government of Tokyo is planning a 4-day working week to boost the birth rate, which is currently at 1.17 children per woman. I'm sure you're probably wondering, do we divide children? No, we don't. It's just economic statistics. And now they did a pilot program in 2022 where they realized a 20% increase in the employment rate and I think a 10% increase in productivity rate as a result of cutting the working week. And it's believed that this will actually be supportive of economic growth, encourage more people between the age of 25 and 40 to start families. Of course, Japan has been facing a declining and aging population. So will this policy work? Will it really make a difference? Well, let's see. We would love a 4-day working week here, but I guess we can dream on. That's it for my top picks for the week. Right, so let's take a look at other stories from around the world. On Wednesday, Apple published software updates for the iPhone, iPad, and Mac that included the eagerly anticipated ChatGPT integration with Siri. Users that ask complex inquiries of Siri activate the ChatGPT integration. Siri requests permission to access the OpenAI service when the user asks a question that Apple's algorithm determines is more appropriate for ChatGPT. Even just saying it sounds really complex, but Apple claims that OpenAI won't store requests and that privacy safeguards have been incorporated into the feature. The GPT 4o model from OpenAI is used in the integration. In Thailand, Thai Prime Minister Paetongtarn Shinawatra announced her administration's goals for the upcoming year, which include plans for additional cash handouts to boost the second largest economy in Southeast Asia, and a promise to break up monopolies in some industries. To commemorate the end of her administration's first 90 days in office, the Prime Minister stated in a televised speech on Thursday that several antiquated Thai rules will be changed to promote more competition in sectors including rice exports and liquor manufacturing. Now, in Africa, Zimbabwe is bracing for another dry spell that could deepen food insecurity for millions. That's according to the UN World Food Programme, which warned about this on Thursday. The country has already been hit hard by an El Nino-induced drought, the worst in decades, prompting a state of disaster declaration earlier this year. While the rainy season was expected to begin in October, Zimbabwe has seen only brief rainfall in late November, leaving the ground parched and crops failing. Over half of Zimbabwe's 16 million population needs food aid this year, a crisis that's been worsened by climate change and disruptions in agri-production since 2000. In Nigeria, foreign investments in Nigeria's telecoms industry fell 87% in the third quarter of 2024, which is a substantial fall from the year's first two quarters. This is according to the National Bureau of Statistics' most recent capital imports data. The sector only brought in $14.4 million in capital imports in Q3, according to the NBS. That's a significant drop from the $113.42 million in investments made in the previous quarter. In order to prevent victims of online fraud, Nigerians have been advised by Mr. Babatunde Olofin, Managing Director of Moneypoint Microfinance Bank, to refrain from disclosing their account numbers to the public, particularly in this holiday season. Of course, amidst concerns around rising cybersecurity and fraud, in an interview with the News Agency of Nigeria, Babatunde disclosed and underlined the significance of being aware of cybersecurity, cautioning that doing so could result in unintentional participation in illegal activity and, in worst-case scenario, incarceration. Interesting comment there. By 2029, artificial intelligence is expected to account for 94.1% of worldwide ad revenue, indicating that it will have a significant impact on the advertising sector. According to the 2024 Global Media Advertising Forecast, this milestone will be reached 3 years ahead of schedule. By 2029, it is anticipated that content powered by AI will have a significant impact on worldwide revenue, thus transforming the advertising industry. Access Bank UK Limited, Access Holdings PLC's UK banking arm, has opened its first completely owned subsidiary in Malta. Access Bank Malta Limited will be the new entity's operating name, according to the announcement, which was signed by Sunday Ekochi, the company secretary, and published on the Nigeria Exchange on December 10. The move has been approved by the Malta Financial Services Authority and the European Central Bank for licensing, and it is part of Access Holdings' global expansion strategy, according to statements from the company. In a 50 billion naira foray into the debt market, Dangote Sugar Refinery has revealed its Series 6 and 7 commercial paper offerings. The company's successful mid-June issuance of its Series 4 and 5 commercial papers attracted strong investor interest, seeing it raise a total of 42.79 billion naira at a 25% rate. Well, that's it for our top stories.